I want to welcome everyone to the Water Board Candidate Forum hosted by the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors this evening. I'd like to take a minute to thank all the candidates for being able to come out to this forum this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to everyone rise and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, let's get started. As each of you know, our format is a 4-minute opening statement by yourself, and then we will allow 2 minutes for each candidate for response to the questions. We're going to be pretty strict on the time. All right, because we want to make sure we have time at the end so folks can ask questions from the audience. Okay, I'd like to introduce our moderator this evening, Chip, and he will get started with the first question.
On behalf of the Board of Realtors, I also would like to welcome everyone and let you know that we will keep the time to 2 minutes very strictly. I participated in about 20 of these over my career, and I got cut off with regularity, so I look forward to finally being able to cut other people off. So I will hold you to the 4-minute and the 2-minute time limit. So with that, we're going to start the opening statements, and I'll start with Chuck.
Thanks, Chip, for picking me first. Well, I would like to thank the Board of Realtors for putting this on. First of all, my name is Chuck Griffin. I am currently on the board. This was my first term running. I am a local resident. I was born and raised here. I have 6 kids, a beautiful wife named Rhonda, and 9 grandchildren. So the future of this valley is very important to me. This is home. This is always will be home. And I am very concerned about the future of this valley. I believe water is the most important issue that we face right now. With the GSA that is put into place through SGMA, I believe reaching a plan by 2020 is of the utmost importance. I think we can accomplish that by working together through the citizens in this valley, and I believe we have the local resources and the people through science, geology. We have the people here that can solve those problems, and I believe that's what is important. The Water District, I've enjoyed my time on the board. I would appreciate your vote for this next term. I believe that we're doing very well financially. I think I don't think that's an issue. I think the biggest issue that we face that I have an issue with right now is our rate structure, and I'm very concerned about the rate structure. I don't believe the tiers are equally distributed, and I would like to see that happen in this upcoming rate review. We've done the rate study, and now I believe it will be presented next month at the board meeting. But I do have concerns about that. My thought is that our basic charge is too high, and it is affecting the Tier 1 users, and I believe the Tier 3 and 4 are too high. And so I think we need to find a balance there and lower the ready-to-serve charge so the people that aren't using as much water, they see a reward for that. Because right now, if they're staying under the Tier 7 mark, their bill's still the same. And I have an issue with that. I think that is something that really needs to be addressed. Other than that, I guess I'll wait for questions. I probably won't fill my 4 minutes. I'm not a very good speaker. Thank you. You have to cut me off.
Would you like to yield 2 minutes to somebody else? I'm just kidding.
It's not Peter, because it'll take him 8.
I'll take everybody's minutes, every second.
I've been watching too many hearings lately. Next opening statement, Peter.
Yeah, you guys all know me. I won't go through the normal history, except for I always like to say Dr. Drummond was my doctor. That's kind of cool. You also know that I've been self-employed for almost 40 years, so I know what it takes to run a business. I know what it takes to run a water district. Our rates mirror, you hear about our rates are mirroring cost of living, 3%. You can't get any better than that, no matter how you slice it. I hear that he wants to change the rates, but we've already agreed to the rate system. the final draft is coming. It's still in draft form, but it's 4 tiers that we agreed to. If you take the tiers 3 and 4 and you make them lower, who's going to pay the difference? It has to be tiers 1 and 2. So it's sliced based on equity. And we paid a lot of money for a firm to tell us that, and they told us how they did it and the logic behind it and the fact that it was Prop 218 compliant. So our rates are pretty much the same as they were, but we validated that. We sliced it a little different. We lowered the ready-to-serve charge, or whatever you want to call it, for a 6%. But we're in great financial shape. We're in fantastic financial shape because we have a AA minus S&P rating. That tells you just how good we do. You can say whatever you want, but the proof is in your ratings by other agencies. So also, we got District of Distinction and we got District of Excellence in Transparency from the Special Districts Council. These guys are the ones that rate public agencies like us. And these are hard to get, but we scored top of the chain. And these are awesome to get. Tells us that we're transparent and we operate well above standard. That's why you get District of Distinction. We have an excellent investment portfolio. We're able to borrow money cheaply because we are well financed. We're going to save, $9.38 million on our solar plant alone, lowering our electric bill by 63% forever. And you know how electricity is going up, so the cost will probably be higher in the next 20 years. But that's our projected savings. The other thing we've done is we've refinanced our last bond. They call it refunding, and we're going to save $4.6 million. You add those two together, and that's an entire year's worth of income because we're operating financially prudent, because we have enough money in reserves and we have enough money to fund all of our work. The only thing we have to borrow is from major capital, and that's what everybody has to do. But because we're in such good financial shape, because we do charge fairly and equitably, we are able to borrow money. We're able to borrow money at the best price possible. So we have water. We're not running out of water. We have time. We have plenty of time. The Department of Water Resources said we have 5 million acres in storage. Somebody else said we have 2.2. I always go between the difference with these guys and say it's probably 3.5. Point is we have plenty of water, plenty of time. It's the state that's making time less. However, we're working with everybody. We can import water. We can treat brackish water. Everything is within reach. We can reach sustainability working with our shareholders. The Water District is a primary player in that. We are 1/3 of that equation, roughly. So we're playing with your money. We're using your money to the best of our ability to represent you as a prudent person would. And that's what we're doing. My job is to make sure everybody pays their fair share in all of these equations. So everybody will. But those solutions are at hand. It's not impossible. It's not the end of the world. But with the best plan, the best GSP available, then property values should look pretty darn good because there's a plan in place to take care of problems. Thank you very much, and vote for Peter Brown.
That's so much fun.
Thank you, Chipster.
Next opening statement. I apologize. I've been using first names, and these guys probably would really appreciate getting their name out there more often. It will be from Stan Rotora.
Thank you, Chip. I am Stan Rotora, and before I forget, there are brochures out in the hallway, some trifolds that I would ask that you pick one up on your way out. There's also a Facebook page identified on it that is stan.rotora.iwvgd. I would also like to thank everybody for showing up tonight and spending this evening with us. And also like to thank the realtors for putting on this board. I was born and raised in Iowa. It's cold in the winter, and it's humid in the summer. One of the reasons why I've been here for 47 years. I moved here in 1972, right after receiving a PhD in aerospace engineering. I've lived on the base. That was when I first got here, and then I moved fairly shortly after that. That was when the Navy was kicking people off the base into the city, and now I live in the county. I worked for the Navy for 36 years, and I've been retired for approximately 10 years. I'm running for office because I want to make a difference. I've been going to a lot of meetings the last 10 years since I've been retired and decided that there are some important changes that need to be made, and there's some things that need to be improved. My candidacy is built upon three simple principles: transparency, accountability, and fiscal integrity. Real quickly, transparency, my feeling is we need to eliminate all the secrets that we've got going on. We don't need secrets. There's no need for any agency to have secrets. Accountability. We have lost out on opportunities to solve part of our overdraft problem over the past years. If action had been taken at the appropriate time, we wouldn't have the problem we have today, or at least the magnitude. And first, in terms of fiscal integrity, it's a matter of spending less or not spending any more than you need to, or very clearly justifying every increase that we have. Saying that 3% is just average. No, if we don't need to spend it, we shouldn't be spending it. Now, getting to what I consider the most important problem we have, and that's got to be the water overdraft. It's been around for 70 years. We've been talking about it, and that's all we've been doing for 70 years. We need to actually start taking some action. I don't have the answer. I know it was asked for my solution to that particular problem. There is no silver bullet. As far as I know, I've been following everything that's been going on. Stetson's been doing a fairly good job of trying to identify different issues, that kind of thing. The other aspect, however, of that problem is how we're going to fund it. My feeling is that right now the county is trying to push the rates or the fees. All the money is going to come from pumping fees. My feeling is we need to start looking at who actually created the problem, and that's primarily the county. The county invited the farmers into our valley. They gave them land that was zoned for farming. They licensed wells so they could dig wells and pump water. So even though obviously the pumpers and the citizens need to pay a pumping fee, I think that needs to be shared among all the people that are in the valley, and I don't think that the county should get off scot-free. Neither do I think that the Navy should be getting off scot-free. So, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Man, you're good. I was just getting ready to get you. David St. Amand.
Good evening. It's good to see you all this evening. Thank you very much for holding the forum. I'm David St. Amand. I'm the youngest child of Pierre and Marie St. Amand, and I was born in the Ridgecrest Regional Hospital the year it opened up, and my doctor was Pete Pinto. So, I grew up on base. In the 60s and 70s, it was all big trees and huge lawns, and Ridgecrest, a lot of Ridgecrest was the same way. But if you were in the St. Amand house, you were aware that the water level in the valley was declining on average of 1 foot a year. An issue that my father was deeply concerned about, and an issue that I've been deeply concerned about for all of the time I've been in the valley. Depending on who you ask, some people will say we have 50 years of water left. Some people will say we have 100 years of water left in the valley if we just don't do anything differently. And that's all been rendered moot. The state of California has declared the valley in a state of critical overdraft, and they have demanded that we're going to have a Groundwater Authority, and we're going to achieve a plan for sustainability within 20 years. So all of those other numbers make no matter anymore. We have to focus on establishing the GA and moving forward. The fact that the Water District and the GA and the counties of Kern, Inyo, and San Bernardino and the pistachio farmers and other people who are involved in the formation of the GA have been working proactively to put the GA together has put us in a unique position where this GA is actually farther along than most GAs in the state of California, and we have an opportunity for being in the forefront to help influence policy that comes down from Sacramento so that it's not nearly as draconian as it might otherwise be. And we have to have a GA, or California is going to butt their nose into our business, and we do not want that. The reason I'm running for water district is the idea of sustainability is going to have to include, excuse me, the generation of additional sources of water, both from within the valley and probably without the valley as well. So what do I mean from within the valley? There are a number of canyons from the North Ranges that dump straight on the Lake China Lake, and the water is lost through evaporation. Those could be intercepted using coffer dams, which are underground structures that impound water behind them, and that water could be used to alleviate some of the issues with the overdraft in the valley. But we have to find a solution. We have to be quick about it. If we are in a position where there's another base relocation and closure, China Lake will find itself at a severe disadvantage in its negotiating position. And if China Lake loses jobs because people are worried that we don't have sufficient water for the base's mission, that could be catastrophic for not just the city of Ridgecrest, but also the entire valley.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have any leftover minutes?
For those of you watching on TV that have switched back and forth from the football game, and those of you who arrived late, let me go over the format one more time. We have a set of prepared questions that were prepared by Elaine Mead. Just kidding. It was from a committee of the Ridgecrest Area Association of Realtors. And then we'll follow up, if everybody listens to me and stops when I tell you, we will follow up with questions from the audience. So if you have a particular question you're hoping the board will answer or the candidates will answer, just hang tight. And after we get through this short list of questions, we'll get to your questions from the audience. So the first question is for you, Peter.
Wait, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Wait, I'm going to set my own timer because I'm not sure I trust you.
In your case, a minute and a half.
Oh, these are specific to us?
Yes.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Currently, all customers pay the same rates for water. Should commercial use pay a different rate? Should construction use be paying a rate more in line with the other users? Explain why or why not.
The way we have the rates set up now and the way we're going to probably adopt them is that everybody pays the same for the water. It's the way it should be because it's based on the cost of providing the water. Whether you're a commercial user, a restaurant, a home, it costs the same. It costs the same to provide that water. It just depends on where you're at in the system. So as far as construction meters, that one's always kind of up for grabs. We've already decided to raise that one. I was kind of against it because you raise the price of water for construction meters and you raise the price of construction. It's just put back into the town to the builder. But it's a very, very insignificant cost or price to the district as far as income goes. So if we're going to charge more for it and the board agrees to that, then that's the way that works. What else? Explain why or why not. Other users? Well, I think that explains it. I think that it costs to provide the water wherever you're at based on your elevation, and that's and your meter size. And so those are the two parameters that we use. And then the third and fourth tiers are based on peak day demand, and then the other one is the conservation rate. So those are the big differences.
Thank you.
Hey, I still got 38 seconds. Should I embellish? No, I'm good.
Stan, same question. If you need me to repeat the questions, let me know.
No, I've got it here. Actually, I think in terms of the various customers, paying the same amount for water, it turns out that Tier 1 is supposed to be for residential, personal use. Commercial property doesn't have personal use, so I've often wondered whether or not we should be having the same Tier 1 structure for the commercial. I'm not saying I'm against it. I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Also, it turns out that because of the meter size, the tier widths are different. So again, it's not a one-for-one issue between the residential and the commercial. In terms of construction, my feeling is right now construction space is cheaper than some of the residential water, and as far as I'm concerned, it really should go up. There's no excuse for people who are bathing, using toilets, that kind of thing, paying more for water than the construction users. So, yeah.
Thank you. Same question, David.
The cost of water to the customer is controlled to some extent by state regulation. You're only allowed to charge really what it costs you to produce it. But the real issue is, are you going to go and find people in the town that you're going to hit up for higher rates for water usage? So if you're going to charge the people who are going to be doing construction, that price isn't just paid by the people who are doing the construction. They pass that on to their customers. So you'll make the cost of building new housing, building new businesses more expensive if you go that way. If you go to the hospital or the college and you charge them more water, you're going to raise the cost of the services that they deliver to the people in the valley. If you're going to go and charge restaurants extra amounts for the water they use, their prices are going to go up. And a lot of those institutions, the restaurants in particular, are running on very thin margins. And I don't think it's fair to raise their prices higher than the rates for domestic use. And I think that the idea that you're going to save money for domestic users is illusory, because ultimately they're going to be paying more for the goods and services for the companies and organizations that are having to pay an increased rate in the water.
Thank you. Chuck?
This is probably one of my favorite questions, so I can answer this. Currently, all customers pay the same rate for water as the statement. I disagree with that. I don't think all customers pay the same. Right now, we're set up on a tier structure, and tier 1 is based on a family of 4. So if you have a family of 6 or 7 or 8 people in your household, you're automatically going to hit tier 2, which increases the price of your water. If you have a larger family, your price of your water goes up. So I don't think that we are charging the same for the water evenly across the board. As far as the tier goes on that, David had mentioned the college and schools. This college is normally in tier 4. I've spoke with them. So they are paying a lot higher rate, as is the fairgrounds. They hit tier 4 a lot of times. So to say we're evenly charging when those schools can't regulate how many people come in or how many times somebody goes to the toilet during the day, or the fairgrounds has a big event and they use a lot of water, they're in tier 4, so they're paying almost 4 times what a person in their household is for tier 1. As far as the construction meter, I have been against that since I've been on the board. I am a contractor, so this will hit me in the pocketbook. But I do have a huge issue with construction water being sold out of a hydrant cheaper than the tier 4 price it's delivered to a house or to the college. So I'm using the college for example because I have talked to them about their rates. But when I can hook up my water truck and fill up a water truck cheaper than the college can run the toilet in their gymnasium, I disagree with that. I've did a lot of checking. I know in boron, that's been a huge issue because I disagreed with the water that was being used for the PG&E project, sold cheaper than what you could buy it at your house for in tier 4 and being exported down there. I had an issue with that, so I did some checking. The rates for construction water in boron is $4 per 100 cubic feet. Here it's $3.10 per cubic feet. The rate for customer water in boron is $1.52.
Thank you, Chuck.
So, you're welcome.
Next question. What do you think the public perceives as the 2 biggest issues within the water district? David.
Well, the first is the formation of the Groundwater Authority. It's very important. That seems to raise a lot of discussion in the community. And the other one is the future of water in the valley. Everybody is aware, or nearly everybody is aware, that we have a closed basin, that we're using more water than is being recharged into the basin. The water table is lowering over time. And we have to find a way to slow down and eventually stop that decline in the water table. Everybody's ultimately livelihoods depend on it. If you tend to live here and retire here, then you really find it important because you'd like to have water for your house. And ultimately, if you want to pass your house on to your descendants or your relatives, you have to have a water supply that they can depend on as well. It's the future of the valley in perpetuity that we're finding is one of the biggest issues in the community with regard to the water district. And there's a number of reasons to indicate why that's considered an important issue. But seems to be a hotbed of discussion amongst the city council and the mayoral candidates as well. So,
Thank you. Stan.
I would agree that the overdraft is probably one of the primary of the biggest issues. That's what I said was the biggest issue. So I'll go on from there. When I talk to the people, and I've talked to a number of people long before I started running for water district, the complaint that I hear most often is the high fixed fee on the water bill. It turns out that back in 2011 or 2012, we had a crisis in terms of the water district was hemorrhaging in terms of the money that they were spending. We had to lay off a quarter to a third of our people. And that was due because we had ignored our reserve. We depleted the reserve, and then we overestimated sales, meaning that we were going to bring less money in. And then, of course, that's complicated by the fact of the tier system. Even though we only lost like 17% of the sales, we lost about 30% of the dollars. That is, we lost 70% of the quantity, but we lost 30% of the dollars. Now, the Band-Aid that was selected at that point in time to fix the problem was, let's just simply raise the fixed fee. And that might have been the logical thing to do at that point in time. But at this point in time, we've got a reserve, and I think we need to get back to an equitable way of pricing the water. Tier 1 is paying too little, but it's because the fixed fee is too high, and tiers 2 and 3 and 4 are paying too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck?
I think the two biggest issues that I hear about from the public, I think the first thing the public's concerned about is the rates and how much it costs to get their water. I think that's probably the biggest issue that I hear. The second one I think is that I'm hearing a lot more is the 55 gallons per day issue and how the water district's going to handle that. I can't speak for the whole board, but I know in my opinion, I believe we need to do what we can to fight that. We need to work at letting California know about our evaporative coolers. I think an evaporative cooler, if people have 2 of those on their home, they're going to use more than 100 gallons a day easily just on their evaporative coolers. So I believe that's the 2 of the issues that the district is facing right now from the public looking at it.
Thank you. And Peter?
Hold on. Let me start I got to make sure I don't lose any seconds here. Okay, here I go. I'm ready now. I agree with David. The GSA has taken all of the thunder, all of the attention everywhere because it is something that people are worried about. So I'd say the entire town's worried about it because they hear GSA and they hear about mandates and they hear about we're running out of water and things like that. So I think that's dominant. The other one that I think everybody's always concerned about is, do we have enough water? And we do. So I think those are the 2 prevalent things that ratepayers are concerned with. As far as how we're represented on the state level in our tiers and things like that, I've been to Sacramento 3 times in the last 2 months. I talked directly with state officials, and every time I talk to them, the first thing I say is we live 60 miles away from Death Valley. And I do that on purpose because I want them to get ingrained into their head that we are unique. So this 50 gallons or 55 gallons or whatever they want to decide, that's an arbitrary number that they're starting with on the coast, and it's going to change. They're going to give them points for living in different regions and in different areas. So I'm not really concerned about that. That's just another thing to worry about. Right now we have a job to do, and that's to get ready for that's to have a plan in place by 2020 on the GSA. I think the thing that most people should be aware of is that my primary concern is representing you, the ratepayers, on that GSA board. My primary concern is to make sure that your money is not subsidizing anybody else's activities, but it's paying our fair share quantifiably to fix the problem. And so if I can just offer some reassurance, I'm watching that like a hawk. The numbers prove it. The state's happy with our progress. I talk to them all the time. They're going to come and talk to us in November and say hi.
Thank you, Peter.
Oh, man.
Did I cut you off?
You
I
did.
was hoping I did.
You
but
did.
think
I
you
had
might have
1
made it. I
second.
don't know.
Yeah, it's all right.
Next question. This will be for you, Stan. There's a current plan of a 3% rate increase per year over the next 5 years. How is this increase justified, and are there other alternatives?
Well, it turns out if you look at the briefing that's part of the rate study, there is one half of one view graph that addresses this increase in the rate. And it amounts to actually 16% if you look at 3% raise 5 years in a row. There is no information in the briefing that justifies the raise. It's not a simple matter of saying, hey, it's only 3%. It's 3%. We need to justify it, and there is no justification that has been given. There are obviously other alternatives, and that's a lower rate. But again, until we know what the plan is, there is clearly some capital expenses that it appears are being put in there. It also appears that the operational budget is paying for capital expense, and I guess I would disagree with that on sort of a moral ground. But we need to know what the capital expenses are, why it's being paid for by operational expenses, and are we duplicating any expenses that the GA maybe should be paying. So, quite frankly, they haven't released the actual report yet. So it's impossible to know what really is going on. And until the public is given a copy of the report, the public is totally in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
All of our utility expenses are going up. They go up every year, 5, sometimes more, depending on where you're getting your electricity or your gas from. A 3% increase per year is pretty much a cost of living increase, trying to keep the rates up in the face of inflation. If you lower the rates so that they aren't meeting inflation, you're just going to have to raise those rates even higher later on down the road. And if you're preparing for some $14 million in capital expenses, it's better to have smaller increases up front than a 20% increase all in 1 year in order to cover some of those expenses.
Thank you. Peter.
Oh, wait. Let me go back to my
I
screen.
hope you're taking notes.
I am taking notes. I do learn occasionally.
I'm talking about with the clock.
Oh, when I'm not talking. I'm not sure what Stan means by subsidizing with operations or whatever. The money's the money's the money, and we put it into a pot. What we do is we identify capital, and that's booked differently. So your operations, electricity, those kinds of things are used to say this is my cost of doing business this year. They're annualized, like a balance sheet and a P&L statement. Those of you who are into bookkeeping. Capital is always termed out over a long period of time because it's like $14 million. Well, you can't book that out. It make you look kind of upside down. If you guys all get that one, and it's based on how long that asset should last. And so it's kind of like a depreciation schedule if you're to buy a truck. So that's the way it works on the books. So we borrow money for large capital. We do not borrow money for day-to-day ops. Let's see. The GSA work is not being duplicated. It's being, we're enhancing it with programs we've already had in place, and that's the brackish water treatment study that we've been working on for 5 years now. And we were doing that way before all this started, and it turns out it's a major asset to the valley because that will be used in our plan. And we get grants for those things, and we share those costs with Mojave Pistachio, Cyril's Valley Mineral, Coastal Geothermal, us, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody else. The base with services in kind. And I forgot, if I forgot somebody, forgive me. But anyways, the point is that we're working with people. We use everybody's money we can. We get all the grants we can. We're always looking for more. And if anybody would ever make a large contribution to the Water District for more studies, we'll be more than happy to take that from you. So thank you very much, and I have now 10 seconds left.
Thank you. Chuck.
I think there is other alternatives for the rate increase. I think we need to look at the cost, as I mentioned before. We have voted that we are going to stay with a Tier 4 system, and that's what we are going to stay with. But I believe those tiers need to be relooked at and change the pricing and reduce the fixed rate and make the water more equitable across the board. David had mentioned that 3% was just a standard cost of living. I don't think we can look at it that way. Our rates are subject to Prop 218, and we can only charge what it costs to pump the water. So if it doesn't cost 3% more to pump that water that year, we can't increase the rates 3%. So I think that's where that's at. I think the 3% is actually going to be more than 3% because we're going to have the GSA cost. Right now, I believe it's calculated in at 7 cents per unit. But that's going to go up more once the plan is put into place. This is just to create the plan. So I think we're going to see an increase in water prices across the board that is going to surpass your 16% estimate, Stan, that you're talking about. So I would like to see the alternatives looked at the next board meeting and maybe go over the pricing and try to see if we could make the water scale more even across the board instead of a lower Tier 1 and a higher Tier 4. Because I truly believe that Tier 1 is not paying what it costs to pump the water out of the ground and deliver it to the house, and I think Tier 4 is paying more than it costs to deliver the water. So that is my issue.
Thank you. You guys all get brownie points for that last round, dude. Everybody beat it, although some quite barely, but everybody beat it.
Squeeze every second we
The
can.
the next question will start with Chuck. The Water District has a fiduciary duty to their ratepayers. What do you feel under the, I'm going to
Sigma.
say this out loud because a lot of people don't know what Sigma is, although probably everybody in this room does. Sustainable Groundwater Management Authority, and as a member of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority, the district responsibility is to other water users in the basin.
I think the water district is solely responsible for supplying water to the customers, and I believe that's our job as directors. I believe we have to work hand in hand with every member of the GSA board and people that are not on the board. I think all of the farmers, the Searles Valley Minerals, the Navy that does not have a voting membership. We have to work because the Navy's mission has to succeed here. And as the water district, I think we are kind of going to be in the center this year, especially if we are running the GA board. So I don't know. I've got an issue with this, I guess. My solution is very simple, I believe. I think that we could obtain sustainability, maybe not all the way, but we could get real close just here locally. I believe that the first thing we should do as the GSA board is trying to figure out a way to buy out the farms. And if we could buy out the farms, that would be far cheaper than building a water treatment facility here, importing water, treating the water, and then delivering the water to the customers. So I think that's the first solution. That would save around 12,000 acre-feet of water per year, and that would put us closer to balance. I believe the district should look into, along with the GA, drilling new wells in the far southwest basin that is showing an increase of a couple feet. I believe that's a separate area of our basin that we could pump from, and we could use that water as new water. And then the district is currently working on the salt water plan to actually desalt water and use that. So I believe those could all be solutions that we look at.
Thank you. Peter?
Oh, wow. Okay, I've got it's really going now. Only wasted 3 seconds. Our job is to be a leader in water. We are 1/3 of the equation. I'm using these, don't put me into the microscopic numbers, but we're about 1/3. And then ag is the other 1/3. And then I know that adds up to be 99, right? But then there's some other people in there. Point is that's the way I look at it. So our job is to work with the stakeholders, the major stakeholders, the base, Searles Valley Mineral, all of the ag users, and the de minimis users, and us. We all have a straw in the basin. Our job on the GSA is to be a leader in that, and our job is to provide answers for people, not wring our hands and say this is really hard and whine about it. Our job is to come up with viable solutions, and we have time to do that. I wouldn't buy out the farms. I would ask them if they want to sell first or something like that, and I certainly wouldn't burden the ratepayers with a ton of money to buy out farms. Why can't we work on something where they could profit while they operated for X amount of time? I don't know. This is how you talk to people that own these things, and you say, how do you see this going? Where do you guys see yourself 20 years from now? And you ask them, what do you think we ought to do? And that's what we're doing. You got to talk to everybody to see what they expect. Private well owners, they want to expect that they're not going to go dry tomorrow. Well, we certainly don't want that to happen either. So we work on all these things. We need to work on how large stakeholders affect smaller ones. Large extractors affect smaller ones. All these things will be borne out by information, by using technology, by using facts, measuring the differences, and then over time deciding cause and effect. Once we can determine exactly cause and effect, then we'll have absolute answers to those questions. The plan will contain those triggers, those things, and we will develop better ones as we move forward. Only left 1 second there.
Thank you.
How's that, Chip?
Stan?
I think we probably all agree that our first duty and responsibility is to the ratepayers, but we also have to be fair to everybody. And so I think we need to work with everybody. We need to be honest with everybody. We need to work with everybody. And we should try to keep everybody whole to the extent that we can. I'm not convinced 100% that we need to buy the farmers out, but on the other hand, we've been going along now for 2.5 years on the GA, and the discussion hasn't come up, and I think it's a discussion that we need to have. We need to have it in the open because, quite frankly, it is a logical solution, and I don't know who would buy the farms if it isn't us. I'm not sure what Peter's referring to. The other thing that I said earlier was I think we need to see that the county and the Navy contribute their share. That would certainly go a long way to see that the water users in our basin do not get taxed or feed more than we have to. It doesn't have to be paid through pumping fees alone. SGMA allows pumping fees. It doesn't say pumping fees have to pay the whole bill. So I think that would actually help more than a lot of other things in terms of keeping the cost down. But I also agree with what Chuck said earlier, is the GSA costs, when you add that to the 16% that's already proposed, the numbers could skyrocket very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So the question is, what is the district's responsibility to other water users in the basin as a member of the Groundwater Authority? The first is to be a good neighbor to those people in the valley who are within the sphere of influence of the water district wells. Make sure that their concerns are being taken into account. It's also to work cooperatively with other organizations to help put the GA together so that there is a fair and equitable solution to our water issues. I have an issue with buying the farms. If you're going to ask the GA to buy the farms, then you haven't, basically when the farms are gone, you'll have the biggest user will be the water district, and they'll be paying fees to cover the cost of the farms. And who is going to determine the price of the farmland? What is the market value for a farm that is no longer productive or is in a valley that doesn't have sufficient water to increase the amount of agriculture that's going on? You certainly are going to have that issue to face. And you can't go in and seize farms under eminent domain unless you want to spend the next 100 years in lawsuits over the price that you're going to pay. That actually, a lawsuit might last longer than our water supply. What I would like to see in this instance, and the county, I understand, to some extent has been working on finding private companies to come into the valley and invest in the valley in areas that are not within the agricultural realm. For example, I've heard that several solar power companies have been approached, and it's been suggested that they buy the farms. Now, the current issue, as I understand it, is that the transformer system in the valley and the transmissions lines aren't capable of handling the load, but that's a problem that can be solved.
Thank you. This is our last prepared question for the whole group. And this will start with you, Chuck. The Groundwater Authority is discussing priorities, allocations, and increased cost to all water users within the basin. Meanwhile, the city is promoting growth. What would you do to balance these two?
Well, first off, I want to go back and kind of respond to David's comment a little bit. The water district should not buy the farms. Let me make that clear. It should not be bought by the water district. It should be bought through the GA as part of the plan of sustainability over the next 20 years, which I've said several times. It does not need to be borne on the cost of the water district. That would be something that was put into the plan to eliminate the cost being all up front. If the water district was going to buy the farms, I believe the water district should have bought the farms years ago when the farms were offered to the water district the first time. But that did not happen. So anyway, the city needs to grow. I want to see the city grow. I believe that there are several things we can do. I would like to see a gray water plan put in, and I know it's going to take some time, but I've thought about it. I've looked at other cities that do this. When they build a new subdivision, they plumb them for gray water. They have basins that catch that gray water, and then the people in the new tracts can use that gray water for irrigation and different things like that. But as Peter said, we have plenty of water. We're not running out of water today. We're not going to run out tomorrow. The concern about the water that I have is for the small users, the small wells. And I believe that through the plan, I think Peter mentioned it a little bit, but through this plan, they're the ones that are going to be impacted first and hit the hardest. And that is my concern because my son, I have two sons in Inyokern that both have wells, and they are the ones that are going to be hit. So I also believe through this GA, we need to look at some way to make those people whole again if the water district affected them, if the agriculture affected them. But we need to look at those wells and say, this well's 50 years old, the casing's rotted, so we're going to give you so much to help you fix your problem, or make an alternate source of water for those well owners that do run short.
Thank you. Peter.
Is it me already again? Hold on. Got to turn my phone back on. It locks itself. Keeps people out, right? Chip? I don't know. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. We've already promoted and saved 30%. That's a lot of water for the water district. That's a lot of water. We were up to 35. We can get back to 35 if we want to, if everybody wants to be a little bit more tight on controlling their timers. But there's more water to be saved if you don't want to worry about messing with the entire allotment of water available today because we all want to conserve it, and that is to take swamp coolers offline. And so swamp coolers use about 75 gallons a day per swamp cooler, and there's a lot of swamp coolers in town. There's one more place we can get water that could be used differently and used better. If you're not growing, you're dying in all businesses, in all churches, in all school districts, in every organization. There's no such thing as you're staying stable. It just doesn't happen by virtue of life and attrition. So the city has to grow. Churches have to grow. Schools have to grow. The controlled growth is what you're after, and I think the city's doing a fine job with that. They have to meet state mandates to have houses ready for people to move into. We're all put into these stupid laws that say you got to do this, you got to do this, and you got to do this, but they don't work together. I went to a program in Sacramento where even the Department of Water Resources says our programs suck because we're not all working together. They're diametrically opposed programs to save a fish, but over here they're supposed to produce water. It's ridiculous. We are living in this ridiculous time. However, we have to follow the law. So we get creative. We use the knowledge that we gain. We have more capacity. The water district has more capacity. We take swamp coolers offline. We find a grant program to buy those out, lower our operating costs, lower our water consumption, lower our power consumption. It's good for everybody. I like it. Vote for Peter Brown. 3 seconds left.
Thanks. David.
So I'd like to go back and touch on something that Chuck mentioned. So I'm not saying that the water district is going to buy any of the farms. The GA, as has been suggested by Chuck, would buy the farms. But when the farms are all bought up, somebody is going to have to foot that bill, and as one of the largest single users of water in the valley after the farms were all bought out, the the Indian Wells Valley Water District would still be paying the lion's share of that price. The water district has in the past purchased a farm. They bought an alfalfa farm out on Brown Road, and the intent was that they were going to go out and use the water to help supplement the water supply for the Indian Wells Valley Water District. But they found, upon testing the wells after purchasing the farm, that the water there was too brackish to use. So how are we going to allow growth and keep this goal of having sustainability in the valley? Right now, I believe we're having 700 plus engineer and scientists moving into the valley, both beginners and journey people. And they're coming in every year. In order to replace the people who are retiring off of base, they've got to have a fresh flow of scientists, engineers, technicians, and service personnel coming in year after year. Usage is going down. The water district's conservation efforts have been very successful. The average water usage in a water district is an acre foot per connection, and the water district here is down to roughly half of that, 50% of that, 0.55 acre feet of water per year per connection. The state is mandating solar on any new building, any new house by 2020, and that's going to encourage or at least mitigate the cost associated with refrigerated air conditioning for your house. So that's going to help encourage people to put refrigerated air in. And as I agree with Peter, we can find grants and other programs that allow us to subsidize the elimination of swamp coolers in the valley. We can save incredible amounts of water during the summer through that as well.
Thank you. Stan.
I am all in favor of economic growth, but it needs to be controlled growth, and we need to be careful how we do it. Now, the city is not going to be paying a pumping fee. So therefore, the city, if it allows additional water growth, there is no direct way to get that money back from the city, even though the city will benefit in terms of tax base. I would suggest that we keep track of whatever the city is promoting in terms of growth, look at the water that's being used, and then when it comes time to pay for the mitigation of that overdraft, have the city in some way responsible for mitigating however number of acre feet it is that is used by the growth that they want. And I, like I say, I'm totally in favor of the growth, but it can't be uncontrolled growth, and someone has to pay for that additional water usage. Now, getting back to a couple other things, somebody mentioned litigation a minute ago, and obviously I had no intention of implying or inferring that we would be litigating with anybody. The whole idea of being fair with everybody is that everybody feels like maybe they lost something, but everybody feels they maybe gained something. There's going to be no winners, and there's probably going to be, all of us are going to be losers, and all of us hope to be winners. But nonetheless, we can't let anybody feel that they're a loser to the extent that they're going to go litigate. That's the wrong way to do things. Chuck mentioned there are people running out of water right now, wells going dry. Turns out there are many grants that are available to the disadvantaged communities for helping out with wells and that kind of thing. The GA has done almost no outreach to that community whatsoever. We've got a outreach plan. We just don't have any outreach. And I think one of the things we need to do is, thank you.
That one really.
At least I'm not the only one.
Okay, we're to a point in our discussion
Chip,
here.
you're having too much fun cutting us off, man.
That one brings me great pleasure. You just don't know. At this point, we're going to ask two questions. Ask one question of incumbents only, and one question of non-incumbents only. So those of you out there that are interested in asking your own question, I ask that you mosey up to the podium and get ready to ask your question. And those of you on TV, you still have time to drive and get down here to ask your question.
Or you could text Peggy Breeden or Ron Kaczynski, and they'll be be your surrogate.
With that, this is an incumbent-only question. So I will start with you, Peter.
Oh, it's not in writing?
Looking at the past 4 years as a sitting director of the Water District, what is the number one item that you personally would like to have changed and why? And it can't be get rid of Chuck.
That's too bad. Just kidding. I don't know. It's funny because I look back all the time of 24 years now, right? I'm pretty happy with our last 4 years. Everything's tracking well. In fact, sometimes I go, there should be a bigger problem to talk about except for the biggest problems we have as a board working together is fundamental differences in how we should do things. Factual information is constant, so I don't really have anything I'd want to change. Actually there is. As being part of, am I on my, oh crap, I'm timing myself. When we got started with the GSA, I didn't like it. It was too legal. And we spent so much time legal that we didn't, it didn't get to the water part until just now. And I guess that's by virtue of forming a new government from scratch. So yeah, in retrospect, absolutely I'd change that one. I don't think of that as the water district is a function of what the water district is doing. The water district internally, I'm very satisfied with the way we function. Externally, being a part of 3 counties in the city is difficult, and I totally dislike legal on all grounds except for it's necessary. So if I could change anything, I'd get rid of all the attorneys, and I would have us all sit in a room and talk and agree on things like people should.
You had like 30 seconds. Did you realize it?
I thought
He didn't have the timer.
I thought that was a good closing.
Anybody that doesn't want to get rid of attorneys, raise your hand. Thank you. Chuck.
I really don't have anything I'd like to change. I don't think I'd want to get rid of Peter. Peter, rather, he wants to get rid of me, that's okay. But I actually learned some things from him, and I think hopefully I taught him a few things, but you know how that is. I really don't have anything that I'd change drastically. Again, like Peter said, the GSA, the original formation was a nightmare. The attorneys drove us all crazy, and I think it caused more problems than solutions. And I unlike him, I still think those attorneys are causing problems, and I want to get this solution done. I want to get this worked out. I guess the only thing, looking back, is that I have an issue with that I voted no on is the AMI. And I know it's going to be a great thing once it gets going, but that's been my biggest struggle, is the AMI system.
You might want to explain what that is.
Oh, it's the automatic reading and metering, but we did come up with a new solution for. It's a new app that's going to be coming out, and it will make phone calls to the customers and detect leaks and stuff like that. So it's going to be a benefit, but that was the biggest thing I was against, was the AMI issue.
Thank you. Now for the non-incumbents. I'll start with you,
Construction water, just the
Stan.
rates.
Looking at the current Water District Board over the past 4 years, what decisions, non-decisions, or actions did the board make that you have concerns with?
Well, transparency is one of my key issues. Transparency is one of my key issues. Any number of times I've asked for information from the board, and they say for one reason or another, it can't be given. There's a draft rate schedule right now, rate study, that they've been working on for a year and a half, and yet there's no draft report out. The public has no visibility into it. The only way we're going to get the public to start working with and being involved with governance is if we include them in the process, and right now there's no way for the public to actually be involved. And so, again, one of my key items is to make the water district as transparent as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
My observation is that the district itself is very well run. It's responsibly run. That the board of directors generally run good meetings, and they have a good track record. With regard to transparency, I would say that a draft report from the board is a draft report from the board. It's not ready yet for public release. The board has to come to some consensus or agreement that the report is ready to go, and then the report is released. That's typical and proper behavior for a governmental organization. If you want to go and talk about the issues, the monthly Board of Directors meeting and the committee meetings are open to the public, and you can go in and ask your questions and make your statements at that time. Well, one of the things about the board that does concern me is that there is occasionally the mention that there is unlimited water supply in the valley, and we have to put that aside. That's a distraction from what the water district needs to be doing to ensure water for its ratepayers into the future in perpetuity. We have to focus on developing additional sources of water within the valley, and the water district by and large is doing that with the brackish water program, talking with the folks down at the chemical plant in Trona and offering up brackish water for them to use in their plant process. So that's happening. But every director should be mindful of the idea that we've got 20 years to get sustainability, and we're going to have to develop additional sources from within the valley and possibly from without the valley as well.
Thank you. Okay, don't everybody rush to the podium at one time here. This is your chance. This may be your only chance to talk to Peter without him talking back.
Hey, I get to respond. You're one to talk. The pot.
Is there,
in the kettle.
is there any questions from the public that's gathered here today?
Norman Alexander, just a quick question. It was interesting on the question of the issues with the city, some of the biggest issues. One is the landscaping, and as realtors, having the house and the front yard looking nice really affects the sale and even the neighborhood. And if you drive around town now, you see quite a few homes where that is a challenge. So my question is how do you think we should be addressing that? Is that conservation really going to drive our help us get to sustainability, or is it really something? Hey, we can try this, but it's not really a factor in our overall picture. Because again, even in some of the nice areas, you just have some trees that are dying, you have yards that are going bad, and you got neighbors complaining to each other and things like that. So just your thoughts there on the landscape issue.
You want that question to an individual or each one?
Anyone who would like to answer, give them all 2 minutes, except for Peter. Give him 30 seconds. However you want to do it.
I'll answer the question.
No soup for you.
I appreciate your question. It's one of my concerns, and I believe I mentioned it at the Republican Women's Luncheon. I think our town does not look very good right now, and it concerns me. The trees especially concern me. They need to be watered, water the trees, and the drip system is not on the same program as the sprinklers. So I want everybody to understand that through the ordinance you can use your drip systems 7 days a week. There's not an issue doing that. It's the sprinklers that are on the 3-day-a-week system. Our town needs to look good. And I know the county ordinances, and I'm not sure about the city or not, if it's grass in the backyard but not in the front. And I think you should be able to have grass in the front yard and make the front of your house look good if you want to. You can do a little bit of grass with a little bit of xeriscape, and it goes a long ways to make something look good. But I know the grass does cool it down. I have an issue with people, and Peter's heard this 1,000 times from me, but to drive by Walmart and watch the sprinklers on in the irrigation ditches, watering the bottom of those drain sumps, and then people not being able to water their front yard drives me nuts. And that's what was going on during the construction also, and that was my gripe then. We're telling people they can't water their yards because they're going to be in Tier 3 and 4, but we're letting people use water out of fire hydrants cheaper. And that's been my issue the whole time. I think we do need to conserve, but that has been my issue.
I would agree there are a lot of yards that aren't looking as nice as they should or could. I think to some extent it's an issue of education. What I'm a little concerned about is in the past we have tried to force conservation, and my feeling is that voluntary conservation would be much better. And I think we would get voluntary conservation if we changed the tier or the rate structure in general, because I think it's the rate structure that's sort of creating an artificial environment in fee structure. So I would like to see the houses look better. I'm totally against forced or mandated conservation. I would like to be able to encourage and promote voluntary conservation wherever possible, but not preclude having yards look nice.
David?
The Water District has a Cash for Grass program, and they also have xeriscaping classes. Well, those are more passive approaches to xeriscaping the town. I'd like to see the Water District adopt a more proactive approach, look for grant monies and build partnerships with service organizations in town such as the Lions, Kiwanis, and Rotary and other service organizations, and contract perhaps with some of the landscaping organizations in town to go out and help people xeriscape their yards. Make it more affordable for them to xeriscape their yards, especially for people who are living on fixed incomes who cannot afford to xeriscape their yards, and often are the ones who are cutting off the water to their trees and allowing the trees to die. We have to take a more practical and more proactive approach. And who would know better where these areas in town are than the Realtors Association, and they could help as a partner in that, identify where we need to start first in order to make the town look good. Palm Springs is gorgeous, and I have every expectation that we can make Ridgecrest as beautiful as Palm Springs if we just get together and work together to solve that problem.
Peter?
Hold on, I can see my clock now. Thank you for that question. As it turns out, I'm an expert at xeriscape. It's a very handy question. There's many problems. Yeah, it was mandated by the state of California that we save water. Therefore, we mandated that you save water. Otherwise, fines us $100,000 a day or whatever the stupid fine would have been. And they were going to do that. We went down and talked to them. That was another office, and I don't know if that was Riverside. And other people were fined. So, yeah, that was a mandate that we had to follow. Arnold Schwarzenegger said 20% by 2020. That's what created the first riff in our income stream. That's what created the front end of our rates being fixed. The xeriscape is easy to do. It does cost money. It does take time. We're changing a culture, and what you're seeing right now is a cultural shift, and it takes a long time to change a culture. There's a lot of people just using the water shortages as an excuse to kill your stuff. Well, I'm just not going to water it. People do that, and that's the way it is. I can't do anything about those people. But we have put in $350,000 to give people money to change their own stuff through Cash for Grass. We got $300,000 and change. I can't remember what the program was. You remember that? Well, anyways. Yeah, Inyo or whatever. We got some money out of that. Leroy Corlett found that money. And so we are helping people pay to change. Education is always the way. We've been pushing xeriscape since 1990. If people aren't interested in doing that, they're not going to do it. I think as realtors, maybe you could help educate people and say, why don't you water your tree? Just your tree, and that's okay. And Chuck is correct. It's overhead water that was always the bugger that we wanted to stop to keep you aware of water usage. Bubblers and drip can be used all the time. So please, if you don't remember anything from this program, water your trees. Water your trees. They got to have water. Thank you. Ha.
Mr. Gorman?
Hi, I'm Skip Gorman. Do I have to push a button?
No,
You're on.
Wait, you got one right here.
I love pushing buttons. I'm a big fan of water. By the way, as a listener, I sincerely appreciate the quality of incumbents and candidates we have for these offices. Mature, thoughtful, well-spoken individuals. God bless you all. Let me think. Landscaping. I had a thought while I was standing there. We're discounting shade. Hooky smokes. Shade is tangible. asset that's easy to forget about, as it takes care of half of your house in the summer. Quietly. It's important. And I hate the looks of dead trees wherever I go. I stepped up here, though. What did I write? Outreach. This is becoming important. I'm going to start lighting a fire under outreach, because I anticipate that folks, households like ours, are thinking about trading in our swamp cooler in favor of a refrigeration system. We're almost having to do this, and indeed everybody will, but we're starting to wait. Surely there'll be an outreach. I mean, we'll team up with some available stack of cash that thoughtful folks like you will make available to us that'll make that transition less painful. So as long as we're waiting, there's a problem. We should be going for it right now while the getting is good. And if we're doing it, others are doing it. So I see a bad thing that may happen, though. The Water District, bless your heart, sort of passed the buck to the Groundwater Authority as far as outreach goes. It's easy to imagine the Groundwater Authority will pass the buck right back to the Water District. And we'll be standing there with our heads going back and forth like we're watching a tennis game. Outreach is becoming serious. I'll do what I can, but you guys are going to have to lean into the issue aggressively. That's all I had to say. It wasn't much of a question as much as it was to get your attention. My friends, thank you.
Skip, I have a comment I'd like to answer you back. And Peter and I both have, at the board meetings for the past probably 6 months, asked staff, and staff is working on looking for grants. We brought up the Mitsubishi air conditioning systems and then also the smart timers. So we've asked repeatedly for them to look for grants. So I know the district staff is working, looking for grants that we could give to people for the AC systems and smart timers. So thank you for your comment.
I appreciate it. That'll extend this ever so slightly. When you find somebody whose largesse and large heart will allow them to be helpful along those lines, you might as well grab them by the front of the shirt and pull them in tighter and say, oh, by the way, a brackish water cleaner, a nice, good, inexpensive household brackish water cleaner for our gardens might be good. I've converted my entire backyard. It used to be grass. Now it's a matrix of box gardens. But it's hard to grow a garden around here. You blame yourself, and it's not yourself. It's the quality of our water. Vegetables just don't like it. My water's the same as chips out at the fairgrounds. All bad. That's all I had to say.
But that's not our water, is it? Your water?
It turns out there, within the disadvantaged community, there are a lot of grants that are available for doing lots of different things, and they can be tailored. But we have to be willing to spend the time and the effort to go out and get that money. It's not nearly as easy to get money, especially grant money, as opposed to low interest rates for loans in anything other than the disadvantaged. But obviously, the disadvantaged communities need it just as much as anybody else, and that would be a good place to start. Would be to motivate, I guess, the GA or whoever is going to be doing this, and start getting the grants that are available, and there are several that are.
Dave?
Outreach, absolutely critical, is an excellent example, and it's fairly recent. The GA came up and they were going to talk about pumping fees, and they had their first meeting out at Inyakern, and the place was jam-packed with private well owners with pitchforks and torches. Okay, well, there weren't any torches, but it was summer, it was warm, so they didn't need them. Then that didn't go over well. Somebody booked a larger venue and were able to bring everybody into the room, and they were able to explain who was going to get a well fee and who was not. And that outreach was critical. I'm sorry that it didn't work well the first time, but the second time they did get across some critical information to the private well owners in the valley that helped calm their fears. And you talk also about shade. That's an excellent thing in the desert. And there's two solutions for shade in the desert I can think of immediately. One is leaves, and the other is eaves. We've got an opportunity to encourage people to cultivate climate-appropriate trees such as mesquites, which grow quite large and will shade your house in the summer. And the other issue we can look at is the size of the eaves that are allowed by the building codes. Typically, the county code says it's an 18-inch eave from the outside of your house. When my parents built their house out in the county, they had 12-foot eaves on the plan, and the plans were rejected immediately because you could only have 18 inches on your eaves. So they rewrote it, they put porch, and then they had an 18-inch stub out, and they wrote eaves, and the county stamped that one. We should go to the county and ask them to allow us to have wider eaves that in the summer will shade the walls, and in the winter, as the sun drops in the sky, the walls will then be exposed to the sunlight, and so in the summer we'll have cooling. It'll be easier to cool the house, and in the winter, the sun shining on the walls because of the eaves, that will make it easier to warm the houses. And that passive setup can go a long ways towards saving everybody a lot of money on energy.
Thank you. I got a question for the incumbents. Has Holly Alpert come and spoken to the water board yet?
I have not talked to Holly.
Okay.
I don't recall.
As you guys know, I'm the president of the Desert Mountain Resource Development Council, and we are the ones who manage your cash for grass grant. Holly is from that organization, and she's fully aware of this opportunity to possibly find some kind of grant for swamp coolers to solar and vice versa. So we are trying to arrange for her to meet with not only the Groundwater Authority, but also with the Indian Wells Water District on the same day possibly, and get her up here. But
She was here last week.
did she speak to the GSA? Mm-hmm. She does want to speak to the Water District too, but all those things that you guys have all mentioned are on the radar. But the one thing that frustrates me as a former council member and a member of that organization is the state of California's infinite wisdom about 5 years to classify a new category of community, and that's disadvantaged communities, which, as you all know, we are never considered a disadvantaged community. But because the Groundwater Sustainability Agency is part of a regional focus, we may be able to fold into that agency some other communities that may give us some designation as a disadvantaged community. But anybody that lives in Ridgecrest that always says go after grants, you need to understand the city of Ridgecrest per se probably qualifies on its own for about 1% of the 99% of grants out there because we are not classified as a disadvantaged community. We're a disadvantaged city, but the residents are not classified as disadvantaged residents because we make, last I checked, 114% of median income of Kern County. So always keep that in mind when you think a grant is a solution, and I'll get off my soapbox.
Hey,
Anybody else got any questions?
Hey, you skipped me.
It turns out, though,
You started with that, didn't you?
No, I didn't answer the
if you
smart
look
guy.
at the aquifer, there are a lot of people drawing water out of our aquifer, including Inyo Kern and a lot of places between here and Inyo Kern that do qualify. So it's not just the city; it's the everybody that's in the GSA.
You're gonna give me my thunder moment.
I'm gonna give you.
I don't remember what the eloquent speaker with the button said, but thank you for giving us those nice compliments. I was waiting for you to say "but." You said you guys are also awesome and mature, but I was waiting for "but" and then waiting for a witty retort from you. So you disappointed me, but I'll give you a chance to make that up later, probably in the newspaper. There is a lot of good opportunities here. The way the GSA is structured. And California is making money for us. I mean, they gave us an unfunded mandate, and everybody knows that. However, they are funding things. In fact, they waived our matching monies for the grant that we got for our plan with $2.2 million and change, and we were supposed to come up with $2.2 million matching, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about that." Now, when does that happen in your world? It's never happened in my world, and so I would say that that's a change in the times because the state knows they need to do more if they want compliance. The state's not expecting anything to happen for 5 years. That's what they just told me like Thursday because most people aren't as prepared as we are. I want to be prepared like 6 months in advance. The GSA has the ability to apply for money to save water and maybe buy AC units that use less electricity than swamp coolers. So the nexus is there. It's up to you grant people. Sorry, I just had to put that in there. And no, the point is that we can use this as an advantage. We can use our position to leverage money the state's giving us to save water. We can say we can save 75 gallons a day per swamp cooler. Give us some money through the GSA, through the water district. Either way is fine with me, but it's there. So don't necessarily have to be disadvantaged. We just have to say we're saving water, and this is part of our plan, and that has a high potential of success. And I have 4 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Neal.
I'd just like to start briefly by saying I'm really surprised to hear that the solution to swamp cooler water use is pushing people to use AC in their house at the cost of over $400 a month, but that's an aside.
True.
My question is, currently, according to the Water District's financial reports as of the last meeting I attended, they have a very large reserve for a number of different categories. I think the total is somewhere in the tune of $5 million plus. Yet at the same time, they are taking in, I believe, $3 million more per year than they're spending on supplying us, the customers, water. So my question to every one of you is, do you see this as fair to the right customers? If not, what do you plan to do to change that?
Start with David.
So the Water District does have reserves. The Water District should have reserves, and it's the responsible way to run the organization. The Water District has costs for infrastructure that are twice that of an electric utility, so they're going to have to plan out 10, 20, 30 years in the future. They have equipment that needs to be replaced. They have wells that need to be put into place. They have infrastructure that has to be rolled out, and a whole host of other expenses as well. By having a reserve, they've not only gotten their bond rating up very high so that the cost of borrowing money is actually lower for the district, they can actually end up borrowing less money in the long run by being able to apply the reserves to the expenses that are coming up. They got $14 million worth of capital expenses coming up here in the next 10 years, and that's going to help keep ultimately the cost of those expenses to the ratepayers down. The difference between, let's say you have $10 million loan, and if you borrowed $10 million and paid it off over the 30 years, it's going to wind up being something in the neighborhood of $30 million to pay back. If you only have to borrow $5 because you've gotten money in your reserves, it's only going to be something in the neighborhood of $20 million in the next 30 years. You can save a considerable amount of money. And if you don't have significant reserves, both for covering these costs and also for covering emergencies, when your capital costs approach, you have to raise your rates rapidly in order to pay off those capital expenses and to pay off the debt on your loan, the interest and the principal on your loan. So argue about how big the reserve should be, but having a reserve is a responsible thing. And with this water district and the expenses that are coming up, yes, I think that it's reasonable to have those reserves at the size they are.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, I just want to say ditto. I think you answered that better than I could, David, so thank you for answering my question very much. I owe you something, a beer or water, a good glass of clean water. Anyways, what he said is true. What Mr. Neal said is wrong. He's looking at cash flow. He's not looking at capital. There's different ways of looking at money. The $3 million goes into a capital account to pay for capital. It would be great if I had to, they call it excess revenue over expenses. They don't call it a profit when you're an agency. Excess revenue over expenses. I wish I could have that more. But that's what they call it. So we can't, by law, we can only bank so much money. And we do have reserve funds specifically for things that wear out. When we need a truck, we buy a truck. Bang. We get the best deal. We just pay for it. It's in an account. And exactly what David said is true. The fact that we have money on hand all the time saves tons of money. We're not we're not banking $3 million a year. The $14 million capital that we'll be spending the next 10 years comes out of the excess revenue over expenses, and we'll have to borrow a much lesser amount of money to deal with that. And that's why we do rate studies. The rate studies are predicated on future spending and our capital improvement plan, and that's how the numbers come about. This is how much you're going to spend. This is how much you're going to have to make. You project it into 5 years. Here's where we're going to be 5 years. Pretty easy math, pretty linear. So that's the way it works. Thank you.
Stan.
I totally agree we need a reserve. The city wishes they had the reserve that the water district had. If the water district had been watching their reserves back in 2011 and 2012, we would not have laid off a third of our workforce. So there has been some learning done, that's for sure. However, if you look at the FY19 budget, there is over $3 million excess revenue over expenditures, and according to the approved budget, the reserve is going to go up $3 million. Now, if you compare that with what the rate study says, or at least the view graph presentation for the rate study, because the rate study is not available to the public to look at, what it does is shows the reserve going down $2 million rather than up $3 million. So there are some significant differences between the approved budget and what the rate study says, and that's something that we all need to understand. Also, capital is typically bonded for, and you pay for it over the life of the equipment. There's nothing in the documentation that says what the interest rates are, or even are we going to bond for the capital. I have a question about whether or not we should be using operational funds that we pay for operation and maintenance for capital. It's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there's nothing in the rate study, the briefing, because we haven't seen the rate study, that says one way or the other. We just need to find out what the details are to make sure that we're taking enough money but not too much from the ratepayers.
Chuck.
I thoroughly agree we need to have a reserve. It is a necessity. If there's a catastrophic event, emergency, or anything, we have to have a reserve. Stan had mentioned the rate study. That will be out tomorrow at the Finance Committee meeting. So in order for me to answer this fully, I want to go over that complete report tomorrow after the Finance Committee. There is a lot of capital improvements over the next 10 years, and they are very important. The water lines need to be updated. The tank is being redone. There is currently a lot of projects that the district is doing to make sure that every customer, when they go to their tap, they turn on water, the water comes out. So it is important for us to have the reserves.
Thank you. Mr. Wicknick.
Thank you. I have two questions. One should be fairly short and easy, and the second one I would hope for a little more detail. Two of you are going to be elected to the Water District, which is part of the Big Three on the GSA. And you're going to have an inside line into forming the GSA plan that we wind up with here in the near future. One little part of that, I mean, we know we're going to have a long-term and a short-term solutions within that plan. It's just going to happen that way. Part of that, one little part of that, though, I'd like to know is, do any of you support a building moratorium or business moratorium within that plan? That's the first question. Second question would be, is do we have, what's our, Chuck brought it up briefly, but what knowledge do we have about the potential of water in the southwest area of the valley around Robbers Roost, etc.? I'm hearing discussions about water underneath there, and I'd like to know, since I don't know, I'd like to know what you know about that potential. Thank you.
Start with Stan.
I am not in favor of a building moratorium as long as whoever is doing the building, whether it be the developer or hopefully the city, takes into account and is responsible for any additional water usage that comes out of that building. That is, we can't just keep increasing the overdraft. That doesn't mean we should stop building as long as someone takes on the responsibility to mitigate that, such as if the city wants to put in a new hotel, they've got 20 acre feet of year usage. The city should sign up to something like a factor of 4. Look at it as pretend it's like a squirrel. You buy 4 times the amount of land that would be used for the water. That way, the new development would be part of the solution rather than part of adding to the problem. But we can't just keep having uncontrolled expansion. The second part was, I'm sorry, what was the? Water around Roberts Ridge. Oh, I've been hearing rumors about water in that end of the aquifer for 30 years. I do not personally know anything about that. I think it's something that I totally endorse exploring to see whether or not it's there. If we don't go and drill a well and establish, yes, it's there, or no, it's not there, we will never know. If it's there, great. If it isn't, then we'll know. But to just ignore the fact that it might be there, I think would be a sin. I think we absolutely need to explore that. Thank you.
Chuck?
I am definitely not against, or I am not on, I'm not on board for any type of moratorium on building. I think it's important that we grow. The base is going to need housing for the people that are coming in. We're going to have to provide that housing. We need to make sure that the city's on board with that. Stan's comment on the city mitigating, I don't know how the city could do that. That's something we could look at down the road, but my thought is if somebody hooks up to a meter, they're going to be paying the cost for the water as it goes through that meter for the pumping fees or the plan charge or however that's all implemented. The far southwest, I can answer that question. If you look at the charts and you see there's a few wells out there now, there is an increase in that water. It's went up a couple feet. The rest of the basin is seeing declines, in a lot of areas. Some areas are not, but there is an increase in water out there. We do not have any wells out there as a district. It would be very nice to put in some test wells, not the district, but the GSA do that as part of the testing. Pump those wells, and let's see what kind of water we could produce there. I do not believe that it would affect our basin. If it would affect our basin, it would be going down at the same rate the rest of our basin is. So I believe there's a fracture there. The water is actually higher in that elevation than the water table that is down where the elevation's lower. So that tells me that there's some type of fracture there, and that water is there, and we can pump it, and I believe it would be good water. David mentioned that we are losing a small amount of water to Red Rock Canyon, so I believe that's where that part of that water is coming from at the Republican luncheon. He had said we had an opening there where we were losing water, and then we also are losing some water to Searles Valley, not a whole lot, but I think it's estimated 60 to 70 acre feet a year. So I think we need to look into those areas and see if we could pull water from there and use that water here and quit drilling so much in the southwest where we are now. I'm afraid we're going to create a cone of depression there.
Thank you. David?
So quick two things. The Red Rock Canyon, there is water that flows through Red Rock Canyon. It's fed by the stream that runs through there and perhaps a little bit of water from the surrounding area. But it's a high mineral content and it's generally considered not potable. With regard to flowing into Searles Valley, one of the original names for the Indian Wells Valley proposed was poison wells, because the water that flows out of our valley tends to come from where the ranges are now located, and that water is toxic to humans, and hence the name Poison Canyon. I am not in favor of a building moratorium, because it stands right now, there are not enough residences for the 700 people that are going to be coming here next year to work on base. So we have to build new housing. The Navy provides an important service, not just to the Navy, but to the Department of Defense for our country and other countries in the research and development of weapon systems that are going to make the difference between victory or defeat in the next peer-to-peer nation-state war. So something that Peter mentioned earlier also reminded me of something that the state is considering. Their grand plan for the San Joaquin Valley is to pay 1/3 of the farmers to fallow their fields. Why couldn't we go to the state and say, if you're going to fallow fields in the San Joaquin Valley, can't you pay farmers in the Indian Wells Valley to fallow their fields? If it's good over there, it should be good over here as well. So perhaps we can address some of the needs of the farming community that way as well. Southwest Waterfield does have water in there. It would contribute to the solution to our water problems. If you'll remember, about 10 years ago, there was a proposed solar plant towards the southwest part of the valley. If you look online, you'll find that I wrote a letter to the state encouraging that power plant to be built. It was turned down ultimately, but one of the reasons I thought that was an excellent place for a solar power plant was that the water district was going to run a pipeline out there to serve the plant. And that was halfway to the southwest well field, and it would just be that much easier for the water district to extend out to the well field and do
Thank you.
exploration there.
Peter.
David, I'm always impressed. No, David, I'm always impressed. Actually, everybody's doing a good job. I don't know how much water is out there. I'm not a hydrogeologist, but we did pay a really advanced company called SkyTemp to fly over our valley, and they can look down on the ground 1,000 feet. So funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking to Max Hijacker or something or other, Heistermacher, whatever. He's from Denmark. He's a cool guy. Matt, yeah, I can never remember his last name. So I asked him, I says, hey, do you guys have some data for that southwest area? Because they flew these corridors. And he says, yeah, we do. I said, so did you see some water out there? He said, yeah, it was deep. I said, what's deep to you? He goes, 500 feet. And I go, that's not deep to us. You know? So I have hope, but I absolutely have no scientific knowledge of what. So before you would do anything, you would want to quantify the asset. And I proposed that to the board a few months ago. I said, I want to start looking for new water 20-something years from now. We're the only agency in the valley that can purvey water. And so the water district proper would be the one to do that. If we did find a source out there, we could extend our lines if we own property, if we could prove environmentally that it was fine. Yeah, to me, that's like the best option. And it's hopeful, but to prove the asset first. Moratoriums, we don't have the authority to do that. That's a policing power by the county and I guess the city. But the water district doesn't have any policing powers. We have enabling acts which allow us, enabling rights which allow us to pump and provide water and do things with water. So that's one of the reasons we formed the JPA to form the GSA, is the policing powers. So if there was anything like that, it would be a county or a city thing, but I'm dead set against moratoriums. That's, to me, the lazy way out of any problem.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
I was just coming up to do two things. I'm going to shorten your closing statements down to a minute. And I really, we're coming to the end of our forum, and I really want to thank the candidates. As Chuck said, I think we have a very good group of candidates running, and I'm really impressed. I think there's good education for a lot of folks watching and some of the folks here. And I'd like to thank everyone that came out to this, and folks watching on TV. Hopefully it was beneficial to everyone. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to let them do their final talk, but I also want to thank Chip for coming in and being the moderator. Did an excellent job. Thank you very much. And at the end of their closing statements, there are refreshments out front, plenty of cookies and water. You cannot bring the cookies inside, or Peggy will get on you. And so, but again, thank you very much for your insight and your answers. And we'll start with the closing statements.
All right, we're going to start with David.
I'm a past president of the Rotary Club of China Lake and a current member, past president of Footprinters Chapter 60, among other service organizations, so my commitment to the community has been demonstrated. If you elect me to the board of directors, I'll bring my skills, talent, and imagination to the board and will help support and expand the sources of water in the valley and address the issues that we all face. I believe that not just Ridgecrest, but the entire valley can still grow and prosper, and I'd appreciate your support November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Stan.
As I stated earlier, the reason I'm running is so that I can make a difference. The 36 years I had working for the Navy was one of solving problems. That's what I can do. A system engineer, his whole job is to take complex systems and make them work together. I've been doing that. I can continue doing that, and it would be my honor to have your vote to do the work that I've been doing for the last 36 for the local people rather than the Navy. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Peter?
Well, thanks for having this. I would like a pillow for my chair next time, please, and a longer microphone. I just want to reiterate, we have water. We have time. We can treat brackish water. We can import water. We can reach sustainability together. It's very possible. It's a quantifiable problem with a quantifiable solution. My job is to represent you and to continue representing you, the ratepayers, in your money to make sure that you get the best value for what you're paying for the rates. That's inclusive with the water you're paying for, inclusive with all the things the water district does with everybody else in concert. My job is to make sure everybody pays their portion, and that's what I'm going to do. If I'm reelected, I will be chairing the next GSA next year, and I'll be happy to do so, and I don't think it's going to be all that tough. I think we just talk and things will work out. So thank you, and vote for Peter Brown, and have a great day.
Chuck?
I'd just like to thank you guys for putting this on. It was nice, and thank you other candidates for the evening. I think everybody did great. Skip, thank you for your comments to everybody. I appreciate that. I have been here all my life, like I said. I was a past president of the Indian Wells Valley Youth Football Chamber of Commerce. I've been around. I've been involved a lot. I currently work with Feeding the Veterans. If anybody wants to help, we do that the third Thursday of the month. You're welcome to come down and help from 8 to 10 at the USO building. That it will be the best blessing in your life. I'm not going to talk about a lot about what we've accomplished or haven't accomplished. If you re-elect me, I will continue to be your voice. If there's an opposition, I'm not afraid to say it. And so my opinion will get heard. It may not be listened to, but it will get heard. And there may be a couple grunts, but that's okay. So I'm here, and I'm listening to the community. If anybody has anything they'd like to tell me if I get reelected, I'd be glad to mention it and bring it up. Thank you.
Once again, on behalf of the Ridgecrest Realtors Association, or Association of Realtors, thank everyone for coming. Have safe travels home. Remember to vote in November. And
Vote no.
there's a few things you should vote no on, but I won't get into that. Thanks again, everyone.